I'm live. I'm continuing reading the Awakening Letters. It is a selection received through the mental mediumship of Lady Sandys. She and Rosamond Lehman collected these over 30 years. They recount the afterlife experiences of their daughters, Sally and Patricia, who died both young and in tragic circumstances. This was published in 1979, and a lot of the letters are from Sir Alvary Gascoigne, who is Sandy's brother. He was also called Joe. His letters form a unique record of one man's post-mortem adventures and spiritual experiences. I am now in part 5, and it is Joe who is writing these letters, and I think it must be the 13th or 14th reading of the 5th part. Today is the 11th of June 2026, and I continue. Cleansing Fuji. Since, good girl, I do want to write to Lorna. This is his wife. Things are growing very tense in your world, and we have come closer and closer to your plane in order to avoid open war. We have to hold the opposing factions in opposite to each other and balance the forces to promote peace. It's not the peace of God, it is only the balance of power. Everything in all your planes of physical life depends upon balance. Magnetic, emotional and biological in one sense or another, and the magnified powers here have to be balanced accordingly. I've had to learn all this in order to deal with the power centers. It becomes more and more profoundly interesting. Take, for example, Fuji, which we both know. This is not one immense power center, but clusters and clusters of large and small whirlpools of energy. How to disentangle them and cleanse them when the whole field of action was revealed to me seemed at first to be an absolutely hopeless task. But I was told nothing is hopeless with the Spirit of God. Work at the beginning, start from the bottom of the ladder, and don't look too far ahead. So I took some of the lower slopes. Van came with me, and several others, all from the service. We entered the tiny whirlpools of power and sensed their condition. Some were completely under the subservience of a negative earth force, opposing the positive earth force, and which the human vibration did not enter. This was our job. The soil on these slopes would have been fertile and productive, but owing to this imbalance it was entirely negative and had no power to give life. So we, who are outside the body, had to induce the physical land worker or peasant to hazard an attempt to plant and cultivate hitherto unproductive soil, and by their positive thinking draw out the negative and impose the positive through their bodily vibrations into the soil. You have no idea how fertilizing the human mind can be in recasting the vibrations through the physical channel direct into the soil. We tried at first with some old hardened veterans of farm work, but their minds were closed to the possibility of good crop from poor soil. It never had yielded, so why should it begin now? Then we found a young couple, keen and eager and full of vitality. We set the circumstances for them to farm these barren wastes, and almost immediately the germ of life began to take form, and the virginity of the soil gave out at the same time a tiny vibration of psychic energy which flowed into the great spiritual channel which exists in the ether almost everywhere. Well, that's a lesson in transmutation. For some time I have been working out this project, have been working all out on this project. It's very absorbing and has many diverse uses. Animal welfare comes under one heading. The healing of all human infirmities, physical and mental, comes into another category. So one is never bored by repetition. I have to make constant journeys to Everest and Chartres with certain vibs, and sometimes out into the upper ether. But this is another story. Here's another letter. Joe's meeting with his greater self. I want to tell you about my old lives, the one in Iona in particular, when Columba, or I Columbkill, was my leader and guide. I have mentioned him before, but not by name. I didn't know who he was, except that he was a very far advanced person in those days when I sailed his boat and listened to his stories and his glorious singing voice. Now you are all nearing the stage when our past lives make sense. It's just like a jigsaw puzzle. Sometimes it's all chaos, and then suddenly one piece explains the whole thing. Well, I am allowed to tell you this. All of us who have grasped and understood the meaning behind this chaotic physical plane are now going through the last round of this particular exercise. And unless you particularly wish to return there will be no more physical bodies for you to live in. Your world is changing, and should you return in some eons of time, it will be to a completely different and less material existence. We all try to help those on the physical plane as I'm helping you at present. But I too have finished my term. I'm half sorry. I've enjoyed a lot of it, but I loathed much more. So I closed the book of earthly physical lives without regret, but with immense interest, because I can now piece some of it together. The first war was the opening of my eyes to pain, misery, and murder, and the uselessness of it all. Then my life as a diplomat sought to build up in my mind the need to reconstruct the world as an evolutionary machine. Of course, I never thought of it along those lines, but my greater soul was forever sorting and sieving the results. And when I came over here, I made contact with this other Joe, rather an awkward encounter. Mauvais quart d'heure was spent while we levered up to each other. I was surprised and ignorant and rather aggressive to this other me, who took for granted so much that you had tried to explain, while the lesser Joe continued to say, well, that's all fine and large, but give me proof. And so he did. I wish you could have been there. I was shown the evolution of both Joes. How can one come into material life while the other remained in pure spirit, one often pulling against the other? The meeting with my upper Joe took place on Iona. I had a sense of expansion that seemed always to herald another phase of development. I had grown used to these changes and had been through several. Gandhi explained them and prepared me for each in turn until I came to Iona. I had been going through my old lives at Crangish and Skaba, and on to the comparative safety and freedom of life on Iona, when suddenly, as the sense of expansion grew, I was conscious of a being beside me, fashioned in some ways on the same mold. I turned and looked at him, and I said at once, "Oh, you must have been my brother Oliver, whom I never saw in earth life." "No," he replied, "I am yourself." "But," I stammered, "I'm still me." "What do you mean?" "Yes, and I'm still you and myself, one and the same. I have been your light reflections all through your earth life, and now we can be reunited." I wasn't at all sure that I was in favor of this getting together, and said so. He merely laughed and said, "You don't quarrel with your hands and feet, and you'll be a much more complete Joe if we are united." "Well, how do we do it?" I asked. "Don't be in a hurry. You must learn to accept me first as your shadow or reflection. but I only reflect the highest in you. This disturbed me greatly. There isn't very much of the higher, as you call it, in me. Well, I find there is, was the unexpected reply. I am the result of your effort and industry and uprightness, together with your fundamental love for the people around you. Oh, I know lots of them irritated you beyond bearing, but you did bear with them. And all that and all that has built up an entity which is me. Now you see, I'm entirely you, so you can't throw me out or brush me off. I am you, cleaned up and ready to receive the higher vibrations. How do you take that? I'm a sort of bank balance on the credit side. Well, I'm awfully glad to hear that I have a bank balance, and of course I accept you as part of myself. I suppose, as you are the upper boy, you'll take command. I didn't like the idea of jetsoning my way. But he only laughed and said, "Trust me, I won't usurp your will. We can cooperate quite easily." And so the oddest sort of marriage began between the two of me's. And I found it was enormously changed, stronger, happier, richer, by far in understanding and in correlating events and the purposes behind them. And so I was able to take on these missions to and from Everest and Chartres, which the lesser Joe could never have undertaken. Expedition to Everest in search of the forgiveness ray. Synth, how extraordinary refreshing to be writing with you again. Life surges on around here in great waves of movement, and one needs, I repeat, needs the power of returning and just talking to people in the physical body. You don't know how important you are to us. Douglas and I have been discussing this point. It's been entirely overlooked by the Christian churches in spite of the fact that Christ came back several times in biblical history, and many, many more times that are not recorded, to show how important we are all to each other. No one here should be without the physical link, and inversely, you in the body should never lack the power to link with someone in the etheric. The awful results of this isolation are shown to you continually by people who ask for messages to be sent through you and not through themselves. Faith is the rarest thing. I've been with your father Andrew. All your friends from this side seek me out, and we have become quite a large group. He is a very important link, and such good company. How he makes me laugh. Born into the aristocracy in Poland, brought up like us on a vast estate, and then giving it all up for an ideal. Crazy, I should have called it, but not now. He has a school over here, and at first it was for his own people, tenants and friends from the old estate who loved and revered him for going into the church, and for his tremendously clever Scarlet Pimpernel activities. Oh yes, he used all his powers, physical, psychic and spiritual, to save everyone he came into contact with, and who were willing to be saved, either upon your side or upon ours. If they died in prison or from assassination, he wriggled out of his body and was with them at the moment of death and awakening. He has gathered a group on our side to meet and reconstruct life for those who went over, and there were many, and they in turn have joined the group who are now working with him in Poland. I went with him on one of these expeditions to help and secure and cleanse the sufferers. I saw the all-pervading obstacle to their freedom was forgiveness. They can't forgive any more than the Irish. So in order to help, a new ray has to be anchored to the earth plane. This is the last in the spectrum. It is the amethyst or purple ray, and once this can become absorbed into the aura, forgiveness becomes possible. How to generate enough of this ray is the real problem. Even Andrew could only produce a very tiny output. So we put the question over to Flo, who said at once, "Go back to Everest and find it." So back we went with Hugh and Pat and Douglas and many others. Some of us had already become regular visitors to those sunscape peaks, and we are accepted, if not actually welcomed. But to demand the use of such a vital ray from the heart of such a treasury was almost more than a queen's messenger could expect. We had been merely tapping the outer covering of the riches held there. Nevertheless, we entered the realm of light and laid our problems before the etheric throne. The great spirit keepers joined us, including Gandhi, and we were allowed to enter the mountain. This is more than I can explain today. Let us write again tomorrow. He continues, how to produce the ray which makes forgiveness possible. It's the heart of the Christ ray, and no one can live without some form of it and be happy. It's the ray that takes away all the grit in our unpleasant thinking. And for this new project, we were urged to battle our way into the vastness of the Everest stronghold. Flo came with us, and, of course, Father Andrew. He was so excited and fascinated by the approach to this great mountain that I was afraid he would still be talking to the nature spirits on the surface when our chance came, if it did come, to enter the mountain. You see, I'm still a doubting Thomas, and I still have these lapses. But Flo was quite calm and very, very confident. As we stood on the shining plateau between the shining peaks, I saw the etheric rocks yield into a mist of light, revealing again the great figure of light seen on my first visit. This time I was able to raise my eyes to the glistening wonder of his being and actually hear some of the message which Hugh, Andrew and Flo all received in full. We were to follow and receive what could now be given. That was the gist of the message. The ground beneath us seemed to quiver and yet remain firm. There was no sense of falling. It was more a feeling of changed surroundings. And then the light suffusion in which we stood seemed to take on the color we were seeking, something akin to amethyst, but of a shade that I had never seen before. It radiated into our aura and into our etheric bodies and appeared to remake all our contacts with each other and every living tie we'd ever known. All sense of injury of any kind left us. It brought also the power to accept forgiveness. That was very potent, especially for me. We have been dragging with us all these years the sense of injury inflicted by us, which is far worse than any injury incurred. But now this living oil had soaked up all the misery within us, and I knew that I could accept Lorna's wonderful forgiveness and become a whole man again. How long we remained soaking our innermost selves in this most wonderful of all experiences, I have no idea. But at a certain point, the color was withdrawn. The light became golden, and then white, and we were again among the topmost peaks of this gorgeously satisfying beauty, which was now in some strange way more intimately ours. I suppose our receptive reach had been extended. Andrew looked, and I believe is already one of the Christed ones. I could see in him an approach to the shining figure who'd led us to the Ray, and from that moment we accepted his leadership unquestioningly. So we returned to Chartres, our focal point, carrying what we were able of this most precious Ray. Father Andrew went off to another centre, of which I believe Iona, and Poland were among those he touched with a Ray, while the rest of us were content to store this precious vibration within the precincts of Chartres, and try to realize all that had happened to us. So this is the end of part 5. Part 6 is entitled Letters from Sir Ronald Fraser. Letters from and about Lord Dowding. I hope you have a good Thursday, and I'm finishing this soon.